Our next speaker is the Science Manager at the Specialty Coffee Association of America. She holds a degree in botany from the University of Wyoming and a BA in ecology. She has extensive experience in both laboratory and field research projects in botany, ecology, enology, and climate change science. Emma observes the World Coffee Research Technical Advisory Committee and is currently participating in a new WCR Sensory Analysis Initiative. Without further ado, Emma Bladyka.
Thank you. So, the title of my talk is Science and Quality at Origin, but I just want to start out right away by saying that it's my thesis really today that science and scientific research within producing countries equals quality at origin. Let's start by talking about what I mean by science and scientific research. There's a big difference between scientific experiments versus our experiences that we have every day, or anecdotal experiences. Science uses empirical evidence, which is scientifically collected through experimentation, meaning to validate or invalidate a hypothesis. And this empirical evidence contributes to a larger body of evidence. Anecdotal evidence is experiential, it's testimonial-based, it's usually a small sample size and usually is not representative of a larger phenomenon. And scientists are trained professionals of the scientific method. That means that their work is qualified appropriately, they have a large amount of background in whatever topic they're researching, and whatever they do is peer-reviewed by other scientists that are experts in that same field. And the big difference is that they have this knowledge of the topic and the greater scientific research that has been done by a bigger scientific community. I'm going to qualify this talk a little bit by saying right away that I'm acknowledging there's a certain amount of privilege in science and scientific research. It's clear that in order to have good scientific research, there needs to be a system in place to support that, which includes things like infrastructure, monetary investment, is a big one, access to professors and students, and certainly stability in that system. We're really lucky today that I feel, from reviewing lots of this information, that coffee research today is really shifted to a new focus, which is improving quality of coffee throughout the supply chain. You could even say that we're sort of in a new era of coffee research where we've moved beyond production into what we're interested in specialty coffee, which is the taste of the coffee, environmental issues, sustainability issues, and how those all are related. As a globe, we grow coffee in a lot of different areas within the tropics, and this new era of research is really starting to hone in on getting more and more specific, fine-tuning quality, learning about how specifically to grow the best quality coffee, not just in the tropics, but in and within many different countries and regions within those countries. So these modern research themes that are beyond production are really starting to shift to be sensory-based. Scientists that maybe never really considered quality coffee before are starting to hear from us in the specialty industry and learning more about the need in our market. Scientists are more interested in diversity of flavor and specialty focused. And really, I think what I'm always looking for is the why behind specialty coffee. And we are lucky that the scientific research that's being done now is starting to really get into those really finely tuned questions. Investments in scientific research can be complex or simple, and simple advancements can often lead to big improvements with, for example, in this slide, a study in Cafe in Colombia did some work on the different shapes of a rake that's used to rake the parchment coffee as it dries. And they compared many different shapes and sizes, and they actually concluded that a certain shape would result in over 46% less damage to that coffee. So scientific research, if it's used appropriately, can be really easily applied to best practices in coffee producing countries. And I would say that those producing countries that invest in scientific research really have the ultimate advantage, because their investment is and will continue to pay off with consistency, quality, production, of course. We do care about that. And the price differentials that come with quality and consistency and the recognition. And any coffee producer would want these, and any origin country would feel the benefits of these. Today I'm going to talk about two examples, because I can't talk about all scientific research that's going on around the world. I'm going to talk about Brazil and Colombia. For obvious reasons, they both have a historic record of coffee research, and they've both proven their ability to be big market leaders, produce quality as well as quantity, and now understand the diversity of markets, specialty, and even within specialty. Let's start with Brazil. In Brazil, they use a collective model for scientific research, where they have an institution that combines many institutions. Brazil has this history of agricultural research that was founded in 1887, the IAC, which still researches coffee. Today, since 1997, they've been using this collective model, which is called the Brazilian Coffee Research and Development Consortium. And the goals are to increase production, consistency, and quality over time in Brazilian coffee. This map is of the different institutions that are part of this consortium. And in the 16 years of this consortium's existence, they've had the goals to improve the green grain coffee as well as the drink, to strengthen plant responses to adverse environments and different environmental changes, increasing productivity, and to optimize water use, so sustainability issues are in there too. All of these members of the consortium include universities, private and public institutions, and all of them are managed by Embrapa. And Embrapa is the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, and they have been around since 1973. And they serve to facilitate this group, and the consortium defines research priorities for the whole country. They fund projects, they evaluate research proposals, and they ultimately will disseminate those results through extension services or publications. So in Brazil, as you could see from the graph with the map, there's a lot of different institutions all researching coffee. And I'm not going to be able to get into that many specifics as far as individual projects, but like I said, there's a lot more focus on sensory evaluation, things like plant sciences, physiology, genetics, biotechnology and breeding, sustainability and efficiency issues, biotic and abiotic stressors like pests and diseases, and agricultural engineering, which includes all the sort of technology around coffee quality, packing, drying, sorting, processing, harvesting, that kind of thing. Now, Brazil, we're all aware, has a big advantage in that they have a certain amount of size that allows them to have a large capacity, which therefore allows them to have capital to invest in the future. And maybe this is why they're at this point in quality coffee, where they're able to have a certain amount of production, which allows them to make a certain amount of money so they can invest in research and get better and better over time. For example, Brazil has done a lot of work in sorting and tracking coffee. For example, the density and optical sorting technologies are really important in Brazil, especially in the mechanical harvesting situations and even in hand harvesting situations. because, of course, a trained optical machine is more effective and efficient than hand sorting. It just is. Also, these refined tracking systems that they use in Brazil really facilitate transparency of lots, separation, identifying specialty quality coffee, and allowing that to be differentiated. So, I guess in short, Brazil is able to defy your assumptions, about science, about specialty coffee because of the investment in scientific research and technology. In Brazil, you don't need to buy hand-picked coffee to get quality coffee. You don't need to buy from a small farm to get quality coffee. You don't need patio-dried coffee to get quality coffee. And we all know from the coffee we've been tasting at this event that you don't need to buy wash-processed coffee to get high-quality specialty coffee in Brazil. And Brazil has made a lot of progress over the 16 years of this research consortium. Over those years, the land area that they use to grow coffee has been about the same, with about 2.4 million hectares of land in coffee production. But 16 years later, they've gone from 18.9 million bags of coffee produced on that land to 48.5 million bags, which you can see results in a yield per hectare from 8 bags increasing to 23 bags. So yes, their production has increased, but we all know that there's also qualifiable progress. And these are just a sampling of single origin coffees from United States roasters. But we all know all over the world, more and more people are using single origin Brazilian coffees. And that's really the progress that we can see in our community. Talking about Colombia now. Colombia uses a little bit of a different model than Brazil. It uses one central institution, which is the FNC, the Coffee Growers Association, which was founded in 1927 and today represents over 563,000 coffee growing families. Some of you may know that they also provide exporting and marketing services for those. And the FNC created SCAA in 1938. And SCAA is the National Coffee Research Center. So at SCAA, they also study many, many aspects of coffee quality, production, biology, listed here. And they also have 8 research stations where they are monitoring specific climate conditions in different coffee growing regions and trying out different experiments in those regions to get more specific, to hone in quality and extension services and growing recommendations and best practices so that they can really make sure that coffee in different growing regions in Colombia can be the best that it possibly can be. And this has resulted in actually a marketing campaign by the FNC that highlights the 6 different growing regions in Colombia. And this is a scientifically founded differentiation of growing regions that was done using sensory methods as well as chemical analysis and considering environmental variables. And they came up with these 6 regions that have, they have some general flavor descriptors here. And this has allowed them to use their scientific research to really market their coffees effectively. SCAA is also widely known for its breeding program. You are probably aware of their Colombia and Castillo cultivars. And these are really, for everything that we hear about them all over the world, I visited SCAA this year and talked to their coffee breeders, and I was really amazed at the level of refinement in their coffee breeding. When we think about a cultivar or a variety, some of us kind of think that it's the same all over the world, but for these cultivars, what they've done is they've actually bred like over 20 lines of coffees that they then mix and match for different growing regions within the country and they're all still the Castillo variety, but they're specifically honed into a growing region based on the environment that they have at a certain farm in a certain growing region in Colombia. And that way, they're not all growing like one clone, which is all Castillo. They're growing a diversity of lines of Castillo that position them to have the best quality in their region. So at Sunny Cafe, they use traditional plant breeding techniques, but they are informed with genetic information. They do a lot of work into understanding the genes that determine certain traits, and then they track those traits as they do the plant breeding over the generations. And they use multiple breeding strategies at a time. Like they might have one experiment where they're looking at pest resistance for a certain line, but then they have lots of other breeding projects at the same time where they're looking at taste differentiation, and they're looking at production, and they're looking at genetic diversity. And so they have lots of different breeding programs going on all the time because they never know when they might need one. They never know what's going to hit next, if it's going to be a drought, or if it's going to get wetter, or if there's going to be a certain pest outbreak. And so they're really hedging their work so that they're prepared for many scenarios in the future. Right now they're working on a new cultivar lines, and they're starting to recross these lines with Ethiopian wild varieties that they have in their collection there. And they're doing that to kind of combat this issue of the genetic restriction that is happening with most of the coffee that we grow and buy today. And even though there's a lot of water in Colombia certain times of the year, they have been doing a lot of research into agricultural engineering to save water in these processing technologies. These are two examples of coffee processing machines where they save lots of water. And they're looking ahead. Sunny Cafe is positioned so that they're not just being reactive in their research, but they're being proactive. They're also looking into processing methods and drying technologies. Even stuff like coffee waste product research. What can we do with the pulp waste? They actually have a coffee pulp honey, and that they're trying, and all kinds of different, almost fabric-like papers almost that they make out of the pulps, and they're investigating trying to make the coffee bags for the seedlings out of this material that is recycled from the pulp. So Sunny Cafe also trains and informs the extension services for Colombian coffee farmers. Right now they have over 1,500 extensionists. And in 2012, those extensionists accessed over 1.2 million coffee growers in Colombia, visiting them almost 3 times a year on average. So the outreach and extension services that they have are really impressive. And their outreach in the form of TV, radio, research publications, anything that Sunny Cafe does is open to all coffee farmers, and they don't have to be members of the FNC. So I said that I was going to talk about 2 examples. There are other scientific institutions in other producing countries that have a lot to offer. And there are even some that are based in consuming countries. So, lucky for us, I think the scientific work that's being done within producing countries is becoming more available to us as well as coffee farmers. And a lot of this research is being translated into best practices for farms that are oriented around production, minimizing defects, maximizing plant health, which results in quality, and really honing in those locally based recommendations with the level of scientific research that they have. Of course, for me, since I'm always wanting the why behind specialty coffee, I often have to remind myself that scientific research takes a lot of time, and we're starting off really well with these best practices. And I know in this audience, we probably have a different level of questions, but I guess I'm here to tell you that scientific research is getting there. We just have to wait. We just have to wait a little while. So, to bring this back to us in this room, I guess I want to remind us that our experiences, everyday experiences, our anecdotal experiences are limited. And they're not the same as scientific research. Really anecdotal experiences are great, but they need to be put into a context of a bigger body of work and to be conducted in a certain way to be considered scientific research. So, if you have a relationship with a coffee farm or a coffee grower, of course you know it's really important to be aware of local practices and sensitivities, and also local knowledge. Scientists use local knowledge a lot as a starting point for scientific research because there's a lot of good anecdotal evidence out there. But we have to know what to beware of also. Anyone kind of peddling scientific research for monetary gain in producing countries, you have to be a little bit skeptical of. You have to be careful of people offering like a silver bullet for quality. Like if you buy my machine, your coffee, you'll be able to get so much more money per pound for this coffee. You know, stuff like that, it happens, unfortunately, and we all have to kind of watch out for that. Any claims that are vague or contradictory or over-extrapolated, especially anecdotes that are extrapolated to different scenarios that aren't appropriate, we have to be careful of. Extravagant or exaggerated claims, unverified claims, and be careful of people talking about research or their experience, but they're not willing to share information with you, and they're not willing to be open to other experts for review. Finally, if there's an absence of systematic processes in an experiment, really it won't be able to contribute to that larger body of work, so it's more of an anecdotal experience. Of course, as humans and scientists, we have our limits. Scientists are really trained to know the limits of their work, and that means that they have adequate background information and specific expertise, and they'll qualify their results and state the limits of their results. If you have a relationship with a coffee grower, I really suggest that they utilize their scientific institution that's local, and maybe if you have a relationship with farmers that could use a connection, you could help them facilitate those connections. Often when we go to Origin, we want to try something new with a farm that we have a relationship with, and that's really cool. But what if that information was already available to you by one of these research institutions and you didn't know it? You should check it out, because a lot of this information is getting more widely available. And I do want to say that it's definitely okay to try and improve individual practices with anecdotal experiences on a coffee farm or in a growing region, but what's important is that no one decides that because one farm did it and it worked, means it's going to work in the whole region or the whole country or another country somewhere else. We have to know the limits of the anecdotal experiences that we have. So again, about how we're lucky to be in coffee right now. Scientific research is really focusing more on differentiation and specialty coffee. Maybe we'll even get to a point in the future where we'll have a more solid scientific definition of what specialty coffee is, and learn way more about why coffee tastes the way it tastes, which, like I said, is one of my biggest questions that I'm always asking, which is some combination of genetics and the environment and how they interact together. A lot of you probably already know about World Coffee Research, but this is kind of a new model in scientific research on coffee. They are a new research institution whose mission is to grow the supply chain in a sustainable way through collaborative research and development. And what's really cool about World Coffee Research is that they're a non-competitive research platform. So everything they do is going to be available to all of us. Data is going to be available in its raw form, online. Genetic resources are going to be available to all countries, not just one. And as there are a lot of retailers and roasters in the audience, I thought I would bring this up, which is a new way to support World Coffee Research. You can look them up at worldcoffeeresearch.org, and one way that us in producing or in consuming countries can support World Coffee Research is to donate a fraction of a cent per bag that you sell to World Coffee Research. And this is the new checkoff funding system that they have as an option for us. So I would encourage you guys to check that out because they are a really worthwhile, non-competitive platform for coffee research. And that is all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I've already seen a hand go up.
Hi, Emma. I'm Tim. I've been mailing with you recently
Hi.
about varieties. I couldn't help thinking about the rake you were showing that was developed in Colombia. I actually had an experience trying to get that rake, and I spent 2 weeks traveling all over the country trying to get it, and I couldn't get my hands on one. Do you have any sort of strategies of how to get the knowledge that you gain out to the actual farms?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on where you are in the world, for one thing. Certainly what country you're in and what institutions work in that country. As far as Seni Cafe, for example, I think that they work a lot to train the extensionist services, and that's really how they interact with the coffee farmers. And they do a really good job in that, but for example, the rake, I don't know personally about its availability. That's true. I think a lot of the research institutions utilize this extension, the extensionists, to take what they're doing and bringing it to a practical level at the farms, but it depends where you are in the world. Yeah.
So the SCAA doesn't have sort of, or the WCE doesn't have like a strategy on how can we get more of this knowledge out to the farmers?
Well, I know that World Coffee Research, for example, that's one of their main objectives moving forward because they're this non-competitive platform. It's really one of their priorities to make sure that whatever they do is going to be transferred to coffee farmers in a meaningful and systemized way so that it actually happens, because certainly there can be breakdowns between scientists and the rest of the world in any field, and definitely it happens in coffee too. It's something that scientists have always struggled with.
Next question.
I have one back here.
Hi, good morning again.
Hi.
Thank you, Emma. Great presentation. I'm back with the sustainability questions. Actually, two questions. One is that, whereas of course science is an invaluable tool, you've spoken very much of the method, but I'm wondering where can we get the actual results of this method? And what are the results on sustainability? What have they reached, if any, conclusions on environmental impacts or what climate change is doing to the coffee industry? That's one part. The other part is, would you care to bring up the aspect of financing, which was in the very beginning of your presentation? Because one of the dangers of scientific research is, of course, who's paying the bills and how that influences that research. And, of course, in that question is included the aspect of small family farms that are not going to be the ones that can finance that research and how that will affect the market. Thank you.
Okay, that's a big two-part question. Let me start. with the first part on sustainability, I think that the research on sustainability is definitely being done as far as environmental impacts, benefits of planting trees, shade coffee, ecosystem level studies, as well as sustainability is really important to coffee farmers and producers when you talk about like water usage, impacts of fertilizers, those sorts of things are directly linked to the cost of growing coffee. So of course there's motivation there. I think that this kind of thing is really disseminated through extensionists often because it is so linked to the cost of growing coffee. And it's not so easy for all of us to access maybe from where we are in the world all the time. I know that a lot of the work that is done is sort of locked up in scientific journals and not everyone has access to those. But the advantage of doing scientific research within a producing country may be that then there's motivation to disseminate it, to give that country its advantage in the market. Certainly, as far as the second part of the question goes, it's hard to do scientific research without getting interested parties involved, meaning, even in the United States, we have all this research money for corn research, soybean research, beef research, and it's government, and so it's unbiased. But these are priorities of different countries to put money in these different agricultural realms. And in coffee growing countries, of course, it would be an advantage to put that money there. So I don't really expect that scientific research is really clouded a lot by certain interests that give funding, only because I have faith in the scientific process, which includes peer review and includes certain steps to make sure that it's qualified appropriately and put in the correct context with a body of literature. Like I've talked to agronomists and extensionists who, they've heard of one study that says that growing coffee a certain way in their region would be really beneficial for quality, but until there's a body of work, they will not go out and tell farmers to do something different. They are the most cautious of anyone that I've met because they're the ones whose credibility is at stake. These agronomists and extensionists, they don't want to tell a farmer one thing one week and go back a month later and say, well, actually, there was a different study that came out, and now we want you to do this other thing. They really want to have really well-qualified results before they go and tell farmers what to do because it often, changes cost money. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's part of it.
Next question.
Oh, I can't hear you.
You're off, Jay.
It's really wide, depending on what country you're talking about. Certain regions that we grow coffee have no access to these things. Most countries have a little, depending on what's going on. But certainly, how I qualify this to start with is really important that it takes a certain amount of monetary investment and stability and infrastructure and structure to set it up. And it takes time. I think we all know that coffee is big business now, and it's not news all over the world. So I think all producing countries are moving forward in this. It's just a matter of setting up those systems and the time it takes to get things done.
The scale of the countries, of course, is so radically different. A country of 200 million people and on a development path like Brazil compared to a small country, Nicaragua, for example. several million people. They can't have the same kind of research institutional infrastructure. It's just not going to exist.
Yeah. There are certain institutions that exist that are shared among countries, like Proma Cafe in Central America covers a lot of those smaller countries. But because of the shared factor, each one gets less attention, I guess. And certainly it's better than nothing, and the extension that they get is better than nothing, but there's room for way more. And, that's one of the reasons that World Coffee Research needs to exist, is that we need this non-competitive platform. And we know that specialty coffee grows in all kinds of dark corners of the world that don't have money for this. And it's really important that we as consuming countries front some of the bill for this to make sure that we continue to get specialty coffee from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we've got time for one more question. Anybody else have a question? Are we set? There's one.
I'm on my way.
Don't fall over.
With fresh batteries.
Thanks, Emma. One thing that frustrates me a little bit about academic research is that, I can write something and it can be read by about 28 people because to download it costs $35 per article. What can the SCAA do about making, I suppose, genuine insights more freely available to farmers and roasters who want to access the knowledge?
Yeah, well, the SCAA thinks about this because we have members that are coffee farmers, and we have members all the way through the supply chain, everyone. So part of what we do is support World Coffee Research, and part of what we do is try and make things available through more education, and it's part of why they hired me, is to make sure that we're staying on board with this really important topic worldwide, and we do want to offer more resources to our membership. Part of what I do is writing literature reviews and articles about different topics, but it's going to take me a long time to cover every topic. So certainly our education programs we're starting to put more science and scientific research into those programs to make sure that we can get that information out, but it's always a challenge. Communication to our members and to the worldwide coffee community is a big challenge, and we're definitely trying to be as creative as possible.
Of course, funding sources are a vital part of how that information can get shared. Mm-hmm. And so if you gain funding through the $35 cost of the article, obviously, if that's the only model you can use to gain funding, then that's part of how that information share will exist.
Yeah, this is part of the problem that has always existed between scientists and the rest of us. And that communication gap is definitely not only a problem in the coffee industry and coffee research, but certainly in agriculture there are motives to disseminate that information, because that's why they do the research. So we better be able to apply it.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you.